G'day expats and welcome to another episode of Expat Chat. Expat Chat episode 28, joined today by my colleague and friend James Ridley, who's the Managing Director of the Asia Pacific office running out of Australia, and I am the Managing Director of the Dubai office, looks after the Europe, Middle East and Africa region. G'day James.
G'day Brett, how are you going over there? What's the temperature like?
Mate, it's hot. It's summer in Dubai. it's given. So
in the sandpit as usual.
In the sandpit. So I like to say get used to it. I think you do to a certain degree, but you never get used to the sort of extremes. It hasn't been too bad in the last couple of weeks. So we're sort of all secretly whispering, hoping that summer's finishing early, given the fact that it started early for us. Back in May we had 50 plus degrees, so which is pretty uncommon. So hoping that it's going to be a early finish to summer and an early start to winter, because we didn't have much winter this year. So
well, as I was saying to you earlier, I mean, what you did on the weekend where you got out to RAC doing some forward driving out there, looked pretty awesome, to be honest. And like you said, looked like what was the movie? The last
scene of Indiana Jones sort of thing. So no, it's good. I think you've got to keep busy and keep the kids off the screens to a certain degree, and it's healthy to get out and about. And certainly people's, I guess, ideas of the UAE is dunes and sand, but it's a lot more than that. There's some big mountains. Two winters ago, it snowed on one of the mountains, Jebel J. So look, it's there's some beautiful parts of that, and I guess by not traveling, we're exploring the interiors, I guess you could say, of the UAE, and making the most of it. So and I understand you've got your own complications with your travel restrictions down there now that New South Wales locked down, and they're going to build a 20-foot concrete wall at Coolangatta to stop the cockroaches coming in.
Oh, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, Australia did very well last year, and we a lot of countries were patting ourselves on our backs, and but I guess we're in a bit of hot water now where we've really stuffed up with our vaccination program. Everyone knows. So right now, New South Wales, they've got some pretty high cases compared to obviously last year. Most states are in their own sort of lockdown. We're in our lockdown, Queensland, but we're pretty lucky. No recorded cases at the moment, or no active sort of new cases. And I think they're planning on getting Pfizer or Moderna here pretty quickly at the end of September or the start. I myself, I'm going to go get the AstraZeneca next week. So, there's rumours swirling that we have AstraZeneca vaccinations and they're going to go off. So it's just ridiculous. So as soon as they said you can get it, I was like, okay, let's go and get it and do the dose 1 and dose 2 and just doing our part as part of obviously the rest of the population. So it'd be good to get that done. But listen, not being able to travel, obviously, I see that in Brisbane, I think next year or due for completion end of 2022, they're going to build that facility for quarantining. It's meant to house, I think it's either 1,000 rooms or maybe 1,000 people. I'll go back and read that article, but
I think it was 1,000 people.
Be good, obviously. 1,000 people. So it's not really that many, to be honest.
It's
when
not.
You look at the numbers that want to come back to Australia. I mean, every
6,000 cap every week. And I think the other problem too is, I mean, it's a great example of why you should never give the government a job to build something and put something in place. They should just govern. Because I know the Wagners out at Wellcamp Airport out at Toowoomba said we can build something that is I think it was 2,500, 3,000 people. We can have it finished in 8 weeks. And for half the cost. But no, the government wants to go use the army site, and we're going to probably spend more money on a facility that's smaller, and it's going to take 3 times as long. So
probably going to align a few pollies pockets as well.
Who knows? Who knows? Yeah. But anyway, you never give the government a job that is commercial. That's what I've always said. 60% of their dollars are spent managing the 40% they're spending. So it just Anyway, I won't get started on that.
No, we can all get started. As we know, Australia, most people know that now we've stuffed up. So it's funny and ironic to a degree, but I guess, we can't really travel or do anything overseas. So it's sort of just, again, getting very comfortable and used to your back door, your backyard, camping, those sort of things until things change. But I mean, it's strange when you look at sort of, I guess, financial markets, And I mean, we're going through earnings season right now, and it just seems to be, you know, a bit of a record earnings season, to be honest. You look at these share buybacks, you look at these record dividends, and it's surprising, but I guess a lot of what we're seeing, it's, you know, it's capturing that recovery, you know, that period of recovery that went through from about probably August last year, where things just started to ramp up, especially on most share markets. I mean, what are your thoughts on that and how it should be viewed?
A lot of questions being asked about whether we're in a bubble.
Yep.
The answer to that is if earnings wasn't increasing at the same rate to justify share prices, then 100% bubble it is.
That's right. Yeah.
But the earnings are, as you said, record earnings. You know, so
That's
much so
right.
that companies can't deploy or get a return on their capital enough. So they're giving extra dividends. They're doing return on capital because they can't spend it. So to me, are we in a bubble? No. Are we in an environment that has been inflated due to fiscal and monetary policy? 100%. Do I think it's going to continue? 100%. You know, I think central banks around the world have a great track record of almost overshooting the mark when it comes to stimulus. And we saw that through the GFC. You know, the US Fed should have tapered in 2011. They didn't start tapering until 2014. And that's why you had this US boom market that went into just before the pandemic. So to me, are we going to pay the piper down the track? 100%. You know, but I don't think it's yet. You know, to me, the strange one is averages, like I've always said and you've always said, are dangerous. So if you look at the reporting season at the moment, you think, wow, every company is killing it. They're not. Just you're seeing the headlines of the ones that are. You know, we don't see Qantas reporting record results. We don't see Virgin reporting record results. We don't see flights. No. You know, so there's a lot of those industries. I think even though they haven't officially declared it, you know, Australia is in a recession now. That's a given. And, you know, as you know, the investment committee or the Atlas Investment Committee early this year made some changes to sort of reduce our exposure to the Australian market, given that there was going to be a high propensity of having a W-shaped recovery, which I think we're going to go through right now. At the end of the day, it's only a matter of time before they officially declare a recession. It has to have 2 quarters of negative growth. And with what Sydney and New South Wales going through right now, and to a lesser degree Victoria and Queensland, I think it's a given. You know, you look at the property market in New South Wales. I think from memory, they contribute something like $86 billion a year to the New South Wales GDP. And when New South Wales initially went into lockdown, they shut down all building and construction. And I heard, you know, listening to a very quite an insightful interview with Harry Triguboff, you know, of Meriton fame, and he said the damage that does is insurmountable because they just can't. When the New South Wales government says, "Okay, you can start building again now," there's so much work to tool up. You know, we're trying to get supplies, and all other builders and construction firms are doing the same. So there's a scramble on for supply. There's a scramble on for
the timeline of things as well.
Exactly. So I just think these lockdowns are going to have an economic cost, and I think that's not me hypothesizing. We've seen it throughout the world. When countries have gone through lockdowns, there is an economic rout. In Australia, I think it's going to happen. I think we'll know more in the fourth quarter. So what's that, October through to December of this year, and we'll get to see that hard data come through. But where it's different this time is people are screaming about economic stimulus to help companies and people in lockdown, and not coming through the ATO and the federal government's coming through the states. And at the moment, you've got a massive problem where that money's not flowing. It hasn't flowed yet.
No.
And
not at all.
Businesses are saying we're like living day to day. If that money doesn't hit today or tomorrow, we're done. And New South Wales government, who isn't designed to make payments, and they haven't got the systems or the infrastructure in place like the ATO does, these businesses are going to go bust before the money hits them. And that's my biggest concern right now. We've got a lot of businesses in Australia, particularly in New South Wales, that are just screaming. And I've always said Australia has a very soft underbelly when it comes to SMEs, small to medium enterprises. And, you know, they hire 60% of the Australian workforce. And they don't issue press releases to say we've gone bust or we've sacked these people. They just disappear.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. It's a case where the stimulus again, or another round of stimulus, isn't hitting these businesses. It's honestly what you see every night on the news. Them obviously interviewing new businesses that have gone bust. I think, didn't they relax the insolvency rules last year for small or SMEs, and now they're back into effect as well. So how's that going to operate now that you've got all these businesses which don't have the cash? I think naturally, they will go bust. But
yeah,
I agree. I think with these circuit breaker sort of lockdowns or the long-term lockdowns, I actually don't think they could. If this keeps happening in Australia, just because it's been so poor with our vaccination program and all that, I'm not sure that they'll be able to lift interest rates next year. I mean, I would have said probably 6 weeks ago, yeah, interest rates will probably go on the rise, maybe March, to be honest, because of how our economy looks. But right now, it's like, oh, crap, okay, New South Wales might be in lockdown until Christmas. The way these cases are just going up and up and up.
Let me just quickly put a circuit breaker in here and just do the jingle.
Mm.
All benefits, information, facts, everything you purvey and consume from this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Should be not used as personal advice, and please speak to a professional. So sorry, just had to put that one in there. You raise a really good point there, and to me, I think the stop starting of those lockdowns is going to, there's no safe harbour provisions for insolvency trading. There's no rental eviction moratoriums. There's a lot of these sort of things right now, and it's going to be a tense couple of months. I don't think you watch the narrative now changing. The government's about learning to live with it. Gladys is talking about living with this, but you either live with it and come out of lockdown, or you try and fight it, get back down. They're not doing either, so I still think they're working out as they go along.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, this could just be, as you mentioned, as part of the W-shaped recovery. Obviously the daily active cases have gone back up, so naturally, we should see a GDP contraction this quarter, which I think most people are expecting. And then it just means, okay, probably are in recession, but it's not something we're actually really seeing or feeling too much, because again, we're not seeing the SMEs that are on the papers and those sort of things, but we're obviously seeing the big companies, your CBAs, your BHPs, they're still ticking over, they're still doing well. That's why they're doing these record dividends, having great earning seasons. So it's a bit two-sided, which is, it's hard to obviously look through that glass. I guess another point I was going to make was currency. You look at the AUD, I thought we would have been staring at a higher AUD. I thought we would have seen it at sort of closer to 77, 78 cents, but 73.4 right now. Bit surprised, to be honest, given how much excess US dollars is floating around. What's your viewpoint?
To me, it sort of comes back to a common topic that has been talked about by economists over the last 6 months, and that's wage inflation in Australia. Therefore, and in indirect other inflation, indirect interest rate rises, and you touched on it before. To me, there is no wage inflation at the moment, and that's backed up by the ABS data. And the reason being is because everyone's saying that because we haven't got migrants and because we haven't got temporary workers coming into Australia to do these jobs, they're going to have to pay the Australian workforce more to do these jobs, to incentivise them. The problem is a lot of those jobs, tourism, hospitality, they're not open anyway. So this whole thing about wage inflation happening, it's not happening. Once again, the ABS data backs it up, but it's Australia's in a dangerous spot right now because they do have inflation and it has spiked a lot. So wages haven't gone up. Wages have been going backwards for the last 5 years. But on the other side, you've got inflation going up. The cost of living in Australia is going up right now because of supply chain issues and all those sort of key considerations. So in actual fact, Mr. and Mrs. Smith at home is even almost financially worse off than they were 12 months ago because the power that their dollar has is decreasing rapidly.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, we've always known that wage growth in Australia, especially over the last 10 years, has actually been terrible compared to other countries. It's one thing that's lagging. It's something that really does need to pick up, I suppose, in the next 10 years going forward. I still would have thought we would have seen the US dollar weaken, but it just seems to be holding on its current sort of tack. And I guess, it's probably going to hold that current tack probably for the next, maybe till the end of the year, to be honest.
Don't forget the Australian dollar is a commodity currency. So we will rise and fall based on, and look at the iron ore price over the last, couple of weeks. It's been smashed from those record highs. So to me, that has a lot to do with it. I think people are also reading the tea leaves looking forward. So touching on your point before about, if Australia's going to raise interest rates or not. That has a direct bearing on the currency. If rates rise, then investors will want to buy AUD to get yield, because the yield right now is, rare than rocking horse, what. Whereas if Australia doesn't raise rates and the US has good inflation numbers and they raise rates, guess what? Everyone's going for the mother currency. Everyone's going for USD, and then you are going to see the Australian dollar with a 6 in front of it.
Yeah. Yeah. God. Okay. Yeah. Jeez. Oh, I mean, I know a lot of my clients in the US, they'll be loving that.
Exactly. Dirhams, Hong Kong dollars, there's a lot of currencies that are pegged to the US dollar.
Absolutely.
But I think also too, the other one, people need to consider is, and like we've touched on before, for every 10 US dollars per tonne of iron ore price, it contributes 0.6% to Australia's GDP. So,
huge amount.
We did get up into the 230s in terms of the iron ore price at its peak. HSBC are forecasting iron ore price at $135 a tonne next year. So
gosh, okay.
I don't think it's going to be that bad. But even if it falls, let's say it falls $50 from 230 down to say 180, we're still talking at $50 a tonne times that by 0.6%. And it's it is a big part of the Australian economy. So I think going forward, it's not a matter of just blindly investing across the board from an Australian point of view. You need to be thematic. You need to be sector specific. There's no way, you wouldn't buy Flight Centre right now. You wouldn't buy Qantas. There's too much uncertainty. Qantas keeps going.
Yeah.
Alan Joyce goes, okay, we're releasing international fares in July. Now it's August. Nothing's happening and there's no end in sight.
I remember when he said that in October. I think it was the start of the year. It's like, we're selling for October. It's just like, well, good luck trying to get that money back once you bought the ticket.
Well, it might have been smart by him, but he might have wanted a bit of a cash injection, So, get some punters who are desperate to travel to put some money on the table. But to me, I think a lot of people have been really, naive about how long this process is going to go for.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think a lot of us think, we'll be out of it next year. But the reality is, as you said before the call, masks, that's a thing that we'll just have to accept, and we'll have to accept that for the next couple of years, and that's the norm. Going into these circuit breaker lockdowns and things, obviously heat up. That's the norm. It's
it is what it is, and you just blend in with it and learn to live with it, and then you get yourself to the point where you're living back at 90% normal capacity in terms of your lifestyle and everything. It won't be back like in 2019, not yet anyway. But it's going to be. I think we're all learning a lot from this, and we're still learning.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's funny the concept that next year it's 2022, and it's just like, what the?
Yeah, where did the last 2 years go?
It's like 2019. That was last year. No, that was 20. It's like, geez, it's all blending together now, isn't it? Good Lord. I suppose another topic I wanted to touch on was obviously that, those changes to Australian tax residency rules for expats. I mean, they've we haven't seen anything yet. No EMs or explanatory memos or memorandums or anything. So I'm wondering when we will. I think we're predicting sort of July, August we might, but I know that recently there was a petition circulating on the APH website about making some changes to it, which makes sense. A lot of what was in there, this was from that submission back in 2019, which I think was submitted to the government in January or March 2019, and they finally picked it up, I think October or December, to look at it. So it didn't really account for a COVID-19 world, and some of the changes in there are just, pretty drastic. I mean, that 45-day rule, that's gonna hurt a lot of expats if that gets put through.
Well, and there's a lot of debate right now about extending it to 90. Certainly the petition raises that, and it's good that it was raised. I don't think the government cares, to be honest with you. I think this thing will just go through in its shape and form. They've got a mandate to pay down debt, and it is what it is. Certainly once the EM comes out, we'll be certainly submitting a submission to Canberra with our feedback and guidance. To me, there's a lot of gaps. When it comes to the family factor test, does a child at boarding school, include in that because they're a dependent under the age of 18? There's so many. They don't really have a proper conscious thought as to how the modern expat lives. in terms of
No.
mobility, and that mobility is a big part of that job. You know, a lot of our clients have businesses, and those businesses had to fly back to Australia. There was conversation in the 2019 report about the ability to exempt certain days based on, you know, coming back for a sick family member or coming back for business. You know, you can write to the Commission of Taxation to remove that, remove those days. But I think it needs more fleshing out, and that's something that we'll be putting a big submission to Canberra on.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, sorry, keep going, Brett. Yeah, you're right. Yep.
Yeah, because I think, you know, some of the, yes, the 45 days is tough, but their argument's going to be as well, the average person has 4 weeks leave a year. So that's greater than 4 weeks. So there's a bit of margin for error there. I think what it doesn't do, to me, it penalises those who live in countries that don't have a DTA. You know, if you live in UK, Singapore, United States, you know, the tiebreaker test will protect them from this new legislation. People can come back for more than 45 days if you live in those countries. It's fine, because you can't be a resident of two countries. So if you live in Singapore, you're back in Australia for 60 days. Under the new rules, yes, you'd be treated as a tax resident. Oh, wait a minute, you're a resident of Singapore. No, you're a non-resident for tax purposes. If you live in a country, and there are still a lot of countries without DTAs with Australia, if you live, like the UAE is one of those. You know, if you live in one of those countries, Dubai, yes, you don't pay income tax, but it has a very high cost of living that factors in that same thing. We call it the Dubai tax. You know, we pay knowledge fees, and those who on the call who are from the UAE will, you know, be laughing when they listen to this. Everything is a knowledge fee. You know, I renewed my driver's license the other day, and I paid a 40 dirham knowledge fee. Knowledge for what? I don't know. But anyway, so on top of the license cost, you pay a knowledge fee. So
any countries that's usually promoting themselves as a tax-free country, there's hidden taxes for sure. Cost of living, great example. Knowledge fee, I haven't heard that one before. That's pretty funny, actually.
So I'm very knowledgeable. I've paid a lot of bills this week, and I'm very knowledgeable apparently. So, that's where, you know, that's where you'll see, you know, a lot of angst with the expats in those regions. You know, to me, you know, especially there's a lot of expats moving to Saudi at the moment, and the general rule is if you move to Saudi, you're on a year rolling contract. So it's a 12-month contract rolling out for the next 12 months. If you're coming out of Australia onto a 12-month contract, guess what? You're still a tax resident living in Saudi. Not cool. You know, Saudi, you know, as beautiful the country is, and it's making a lot of changes right now, and it's really reinventing itself. It's still not quite a hardship posting, but it's not as easy a posting as it is, say, in London or Singapore. So therefore, you need to be paid a premium to cope with that. But if you're paying Australian tax on a Saudi wage, that premium suddenly goes. It's not worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. The other, I suppose, test after those 45 days, those factor tests, which is sort of a bit of a catch-all, you know, when you're looking at the right to reside in Australia. So that's anyone that's a citizen, permanent resident. I mean, there's a bit of a that's right. I mean, but there's a bit of a double up here, because one of the tests was Australian accommodation. So that's kind of referring to maybe an investment property that's not currently tenanted, or a main residence which is vacant. I think they're even saying that sort of if you have when you own a portion in a share,
timeshare,
accommodation. Timeshare. That's right. Timeshare can even be considered Australian accommodation, but then one of the other ones was Australian economic interest. So Australian economic interest is usually taxable Australian property. So that's a double up right there on if you have an investment property, or if you have you know, some sort of a main residence. So it's very interesting. Australian family, most people will have family back in Australia. So you look at those factor tests, and I'd be shocked if you came across an expat that's overseas that didn't satisfy at least 3 of them easily. So it's
and I think, you know, from the government's point of view, it's very disingenuous from their body language and then their commentary saying how we're trying to make this simpler, because in actual fact, at the moment, under the current 4 tests, you know, resides test, domicile 183, and Commonwealth Super, the real benefit of that is there's no defined time frame apart from the 183-day test in terms of your time in Australia. Very easy to quantify. You can get a movement report from the Department of Immigration that shows you've been outside the country for greater than 6 months, so happy days. Under the new rules, if you have to apply every time for an exemption from the Commission of Taxation in terms of exempting days, the compliance framework behind all these, justifications of business travel or sick mother or those sort of things to get these to get these days excluded, it's going to create more compliance for a lot of folks. But, to me, I actually did find a silver lining. We recently presented with the Australian Business Group Abu Dhabi down at the W Hotel in Yas Island a couple of weeks ago, discussing this, and people were quite surprised. I did find one big silver lining for these new rules, and that is for trailing spouses of diplomats. So at the moment, diplomats, when they move overseas, they're considered Australian tax resident, and so is their immediate family. So wives can work, but they're still paying Australian tax and all those sort of things. Under the new rules, there's actually a carve-out for those people. And long story short, an Australian diplomat's husband or wife, or whoever's the trailing spouse, can actually work under local taxation rules. So that is actually a win for, so there is a silver lining. Small one, but it's there.
Yeah. I mean, talking about trailing spouses, a common question I get asked about with some clients is when we might need sort of, your tax identification number or TINs or SSNs or anything like that for their Australian account details. And when you have a trailing spouse that isn't working, they're often or commonly not actually issued with one. And it can cause a bit of an issue with your financial accounts when you can provide a TIN, but your spouse can't, even though their situation is exactly the same technically. So that can always bring into sort of residency questions. But I think one thing which will be clear once, and if this new update in legislation comes through, or changing the tax residency rules, fingers crossed you're wrong, Brett. Fingers crossed they pull it apart and change it. But I could see a lot of expats finding the need to engage an expat or international accountant to seek a private ruling. If they're back in Australia and they're queried, they're going to need a private ruling, which ideally is that not necessarily a shield against the Commissioner of Tax, but they're going to need something that sort of dictates how they're going to be treated in that financial year if they've been forced back to Australia and they can't leave. Because I guess that's one of the other issues that will come about, and we'll talk about it on our next episode. But it's the fact that they've made a change to, I suppose, expats wanting to leave. Ordinarily a resident outside of Australia, they've brought through these new rules. But listen, I think we've talked about enough today, and I think we've got some really good items that I want to talk about on the next episode. So love to go on these new rules that I suppose is keeping expats in Australia, which is a bit unusual. I want to talk about some questions around estate planning for non-residents, because it's actually a common one that we don't think about when we're going to be receiving a gift or we're gifting certain asset classes to different individuals and we're a non-resident at the time. And just a question or two from some clients that wanted us to throw it up on Expat Chat, just addressing it for everyone to hear as well. So I think that's a good way to wind it up for today.
Sounds good, mate. Well, good to catch up as always, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Sounds good, mate. Speak soon.
Cheers. Thanks, mate.
Cheers, mate.